Hey guys, Art Decline here, Average Picker. So we are going off the beaten path a little bit here. And this is going to be part one of what is likely to be, I guess, a three-part in video. And what we're going to be looking at is instruction on teaching lockpicking. So basically, I'm going to try to share some tips and tricks as far as how to teach or how to instruct people in how to pick a lock. And you can transfer some of this over to video, but most of this is coming from like not a classroom necessarily standpoint, but close to it. So something where you're live in front of 1 to X number of people. You may, and it just kind of depends on what you may have around you to be able to work with. You may have a whiteboard, maybe you even have a projector or something. And the reason for this small video series came out of kind of a larger conversation I was having with somebody. And the comment got made, well, lockpickers aren't necessarily instructors, right? And you want to be as good of an instructor as you can, because I mean that's just going to make the experience more pleasant for people, and the better experience they have, of course, they're more likely to stick to it, and the better picker they're going to come out to be. And I think that's kind of what we all want, especially to help grow lock sport and lock picking as just a hobby, right? And so I originally have an elementary ed background, and I also have a fair amount of instruction background in just training people and doing things like that. This is not to say I am a great instructor or anything like that, but I thought, you know what, we don't really have any videos on this kind of stuff, and a lot of us do show other people how to pick locks. So maybe this is a little niche I can feed some information into, and we get a conversation going. Other people can start sharing stuff, whatever, and give some other people some video ideas, things like that. So yeah, there we go. That's what this video is going to be about. We're going to be just looking at some generalities of learning. We're not going to get academic or anything. Part 2, I will be going over kind of how I choose to lay out instruction when I'm teaching picking. And part 3, I'll probably just do a general basic picking instruction video start to finish. So that's what we're looking at. This is just some general concepts around education. Part 2 will be kind of a more nuts and bolts, like why I lay things out the way I do and when to introduce the different subtopics of picking within instruction. And 3 will be an example, I guess, of how I tend to do it. So there we go. If that interests you, great. Stick around. I'll try to keep this all as brief as possible. All right. Okay, so this video is actually a bad example of what I'm about to tell you. And I think we all know, or we've all heard by now, that different people learn differently. And that doesn't mean that the way that a person learns in one particular way and they can't learn in any other way. It just means that we all kind of have a way that we learn best. That there is a methodology that we respond to better. Now, if you look this up online, and like I said, we're not going to get too in depth with this because this really can go down a rabbit hole, but you generally find a breakdown of about 4 to 8 different concepts. The most popular would fall into what's called the VARK system, and that's for visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetics. Kinesthetics. There we go. Let's get I need more mocha. And they kind of are basically what they sound like. Visual people are more visual learners. Auditory, you can do what we're doing here, which is more like just lecturing to you. Though there is a breakdown of auditory where people learn best through sing-song, but we know it's not practical to write a song about everything you do. So reading and writing, that tends to be what I am for most things. So I tend to take a lot of notes. And it's just because that act of writing it helps reinforce it for me. And kinesthetics is a kind of hands-on approach to learning. And I don't want to just say hands-on as in you're there and you're working on the lock, but hands-on is in more of a dialogue, and it can cover exchanges, debates. It's kind of a learn as you go, and the more interaction kinesthetic people have with the instruction, the better. And the predominant of the population tends to score pretty high for kinesthetic. And it's kind of because it starts to loop back into the whole thing itself. And that's so the whole point here is the more of those you can address, the better. So here I am only addressing one, and that is I'm just lecturing to you. So all you're doing is hearing it, right? Auditory. That's it. I'm not holding up any props. Yeah, nothing like that. I'm using one method, which is not good. Now, some of you who are reading and writing people, you may take this video really seriously and sit down and start, writing notes on it, in which case I've lucked out and I've got 2 covered, but really I'm only covering 1. So yeah, the more props you can have and the more ways you can deliver instruction, the better. So if you have access to be able to project a PowerPoint presentation, awesome. Because that helps cover your visual learners. You're going to be talking to them, of course, so you've got auditory covered. If you've got hands-on props, picks and locks to share with people so they can actually practice in doing it, you've got a lot of your kinesthetic hands-on stuff covered. And reading and writing tends to take care of itself. Like I said, I just take notes normally, and that's what a lot of us reading, writing people do anyway, is we take notes. So that one's pretty easy to get covered, but you can also do handouts, right? Maybe just printing off whatever your PowerPoint slides are and handing those out to people. That helps cover your reading and writing people, because now they've got it there in front of them. Even though it's going to be projected, they've got it there, and they can actually put your additional notes on those printouts for each of those slides, because you don't want to just read your PowerPoint slides, right? You want to talk around your PowerPoint slides. So the PowerPoint slides should have the major points on it, and you should be talking the details on it. Now, of course, when you do lockpicking instruction, you kind of tend to do it anywhere that you have access to available space. So you don't always have access to be able to put up PowerPoint. You may have it on a laptop, but not everybody can see it, because you may be doing it in a classroom environment, maybe doing it in a bar, a coffee shop. It may be a folding table at an event. It could just be something like that, and you're just knocking out as many people as you can, 1 or 2 at a time as they come up to you. But again, remember, the point is just the more of those aspects you can cover, the better. Okay, so the other big takeaway is kind of how you structure things. And like I said, in part 2, I'm going to look at how and demonstrate why I structure things the way I do. But a lot of this comes from a thing called Bloom's taxonomy. And to put it simply, Bloom's taxonomy covers just how people synthesize information. And it's everything from teacher instructions and teaching and education, all the way down to on the student level, on like a good way to write an essay or research paper or things like that. So it's quite an expansive topic, I guess, or methodology, Bloom's is. But they have a pretty basic system within their stuff called RACE, and it stands for Restate, Answer, Cite, Explain. Here, I'll give you a visual. Yeah, Restate, Answer, Cite, Explain. It's very similar to other systems. There's one popular one called PEAL, and it's Point, Evidence, Explanation, Link. And these kind of all mean the same thing. And it's basically, say what the topic is, or the subtopic, right? Because in lockpicking is composed of a lot of different subtopics, right? We've got the parts of the lock, how a lock works, we've got, tensioning, we've got different methods of picking, be it single pin picking or raking, things like that, right? You can think of all these as little different subtopics. And so what you basically do is you state what it is, right? Like, hey, we're going to be looking at single pin picking, right? And then you just explain what that means, right? and then you go through and you demonstrate that, and then you give an example. And the example can be, you can give a straight example based off of all the stuff you've just said, right? So you can go through and do an actual practical demonstration or something more hands-on at that point. Though you can also kind of use explain example to kind of push into an analogy or a metaphor or something like that, just to help to get the point across a little bit more. And that's kind of what it comes down to, right? I mean, there's a lot more details on it. Bloom's taxonomy is a great little resource to look into if you're really interested in digging into the educational aspects of it. But basically, you just want to state what you're going to be looking at, right? Subtopic wise. Explain through what it is, what it entails, that kind of thing. And then give some kind of an example of it, be that a real hands-on demonstration, letting maybe the people there do some hands-on with it, showing even visually maybe what that looks like, up on a board, or just using a metaphor to kind of drive the point home, right? Like if you're talking about tolerances, you can actually show and demonstrate. You can find a lock, and just kind of show, hey, and that wiggle room, that's what we're talking about tolerance, right? Or maybe, if people aren't getting it, you can maybe use an analogy or a metaphor that they might understand. How sometimes you stop your car and put the emergency brake on, you put it in park and everything, you forget to use the emergency brake, which you shouldn't be doing. You should use it. But you take your foot off the gas and the car rolls a little bit, right? It's got that little bit of roll to it before it comes to a stop. That's a tolerance, right? So anybody that's driven a car can kind of understand that. If you're teaching to little kids, you might have to come up with something a little bit different to kind of help drive that point home. But that's just the basic structure of how to do it, right? You don't explain or give an analogy first and then explain what the topic is, right? Say, here's what we're looking at. We're looking at single pin picking. Here's how single pin picking works. And here's an example of single pin picking. That's kind of the basic gist of the layout of it. Okay, and one final point, because I think I've got time. I don't want the video to get too long. And I'm going to talk about this in part 2 as well. Stay on topic. Cannot stress it enough to stay on topic. You are there to teach these people the basics of lockpicking or something else maybe, right? Or maybe you're doing a more advanced class or whatever. But let's say it's the basics of lockpicking. Stay on that. Stay focused as you can on that topic. You don't want to open up the floor and get things diverging into other bits. I'm going to use an example here, and hopefully it doesn't step on anybody's toes. There's a lot of prepper groups out there, and they do lockpicking instruction. And they're usually just based off the MIT guide, right? Somebody's read the MIT guide, and then they go and they teach it to a group. And they actually have pretty decent turnouts at a lot of these things. Now, they are teaching this as a wedge or a way to get people into prepping, right? I personally don't think you should be creating a delivery system out of your instruction for something else. We want people interested in picking. We're going to teach them picking. I don't think we should be using picking as a delivery system to get people interested in a wider version of, prepping or anything like that. But in a lot of these kind of things, it can get very political sometimes. And so, yeah, especially politics, leave your politics out of it, leave religion out of it. I would say even leave fluffy bunnies and kittens out of it, right? You might, like I do some animal rescue work. I'm not even going to mention that, I may mention that on the side, maybe if I'm taking a break or after the instruction is done and I'm just talking one-on-one with somebody, fine. But the moment I start talking about, or I mention, I also do some animal rescue, now somebody's going to want to show me a picture of their pet, right? And then someone else is going to want to show me theirs. Then someone else is going to go, oh, you could use lock picking to, pick locks to get into people's gates to rescue their dogs. No. And just because I mentioned that, I'm also going to say, and I'm going to do it again in part 2, stress the ethics behind lockpicking for sure. You want to be stressing that all throughout the whole thing because we don't want to get into that muddy situation. But stay focused, stay on topic, because the moment you deviate into something else, you're opening up the floor for everyone who has an opinion on that, right? And they're all going to want to give a response. And, I don't want to say you've got a crazy idea, but let's say you've got some crazy ideas. Somebody else has some even crazier ideas. And I have seen some things derail, into somebody claiming to be an expert on FEMA and UN death camp trains, right? That are going to take everybody's guns and ship them off to FEMA death camps. That's not why we're there. We're there to teach picking. We're not there to get into that kind of stuff with it. So yeah, can't stress that enough. Stress the ethics, stay on topic. And then the other 2 main points of this whole video, different people learn differently. So the more ways you can do things, the better. And how to kind of lay things out, lay them out in a way that makes sense. State the problem, explain it, demonstrate it.